the board workshop today on May 6th, 2021. This is a special workshop for SK School Board discussing capacity of our buildings. First things first, let's call, do a roll call, please.
Chair Wheeler?
Here.
Vice Chair Rydell?
Present, but Denise, we can barely hear you and Ben, at least that's my case.
Director Shibahara?
Present.
Director Johnston? Director Berman?
Sounds like a Berman. I'm here.
Director Martinez? Director Snyder?
I believe that was me, yes.
Director Rydell, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you, you're a little quiet, but I can hear you, but can't really hear Chair Wheeler, or can't hear Denise at all.
You don't have a microphone, so.
We're going to work on the volume control issues.
That's better, Ben.
That sounds good, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us in person and via whatever our platform is tonight, Zoom, I believe it is. Again, tonight we're here to discuss growth capacity within the Escada School District and the community at large. We got four main topics we're going to try to roll through. First one's kind of going to lay the groundwork of where we're at. We're going to invite Director Mike Ware to come up, give us a rundown on the capacity of the schools, and Maggie's going to add in some additional information with the Psu Population Study and some other things without letting too much information out. Mike and Maggie, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I'll start out with the PSU population study, where it's at and where we need to go from here. So as you can see kind of on this graph up there, so as you can see, the white line is our PSU population study and the green line is our actual district enrollment. So our actual district enrollment continues to travel up above what the PSU study predicted. It really is pretty close, but as we deal with capacity issues, every single student matters. So we start to see this divergence right about there. And in 2020, you can see, that those numbers should be bumped all the way to 2020. So they predicted 1709 for 2020, and we are at 1766 for 2020. So we're about 60 kids over what was predicted. If you want to go to the next slide. So I continued the projections. So the PSU study predicts out through 2023, and they predict that by 2023 we will be at 1725. We, of course, have already surpassed what they predicted we would be in 2023. So I just extended that line. If we increase the exact amount that we increased this last year, which I think we will probably increase more than that just based off of housing and how we're doing throughout this pandemic, how we're attracting new students. But if we continued at this exact rate of expansion, which is a little slow, we would be at 1846, which is over 100 over the PSU study ends at. So my recommendation would be to get a new population study that extends out a little further and takes into account everything that has changed, including the rapid construction expansion, our handling during the pandemic, our status in the community, and our ability to attract new families so that we can get a more accurate look at capacity and projected capacity for the future.
And I want to kind of take this opportunity, I think, to kind of jump in front a little bit and welcome the viewers who are watching as well. And again, I'm excited about our new technology and its usage today. It's really cool that we're able to address for Board of Directors who are attending virtually today, as well as our ability to be in the boardroom and accessing that. So if you're watching on YouTube tonight, I'm excited to meet the needs of our community to become more transparent and offer this conversation in different ways to meet the needs of all of our stakeholders. That's number one. And two, again, the purpose of this workshop today is really for us as a school board team to have a discussion about growth and try to think about long-term strategy and management as the growth continues to come our way. The one thing that is out of our control is the growth. The growth is going to come regardless of if the community is ready for it or not. The houses continue to be built. Families are very interested in the Estacada city limits and surrounding areas. It's a beautiful place, of course. It's a secret we've known for a long time, but that growth is coming. And so the purpose of tonight is really a group of leaders who would like to take a more proactive leadership role in thinking about how the Estacada School District can jump in front of this growth that is coming and how best we, as an elected school board of representatives who represents the community as well as its superintendent, can address this growth and start making proactive actions to be ready for this growth as it comes so that we can best serve Estacada's kids. And so I appreciate Maggie Kelly tonight, who got this thing started, our communications director, to take a look at the fact that we are already substantially over what Portland State predicted we'd be at this time. And it does appear that by the end of this, we will be we're already well over the 2023 projections. And so we'd like to start by asking Portland State for a new survey or a new population study to help us as we anticipate that growth. But really, again, tonight is more of a workshop conversation, different than a board meeting. And so feel free, Board of Directors, to interrupt at any moment and ask questions because the purpose of this is really for us to discuss, to start to align our mission, vision, and values towards what we want to do so that we are a team and we're moving together as a team and we're trying our best to meet the needs of our current students and prospective students who will be moving into our community within the next 5 to 10 years. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit, and I've asked our Executive Director of Operations, Mike Ware, to approach tonight and talk about current capacity of our school buildings. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. We did a growth and capacity analysis over the last few days, and working with our leaders at the building level, trying to understand where we currently are. So if you see in the top left of the graph, our current enrollment at River Mill Elementary is 457. Clackamas River is 400 students. Estacada Middle School, 410, and Estacada High School, 479. Before we get to the projected enrollment, right now on the far right-hand side, you can see our current classroom usage. River Mill is at capacity, and that's every classroom is being used, whether it's for students. We do have 2 dedicated classrooms that have been converted for our learning centers. So they're at max capacity right now, and no room to really grow within that building. Clackamas River Elementary is at 85%. Estacada Middle School is at 92%. Estacada Middle School is at 92%. Estacada High School is at 84%. And what does that kind of mean in terms of classroom spaces? So obviously at River Mill, there's no additional classroom spaces currently. At CRE, they anticipate 2 additional free or available classrooms coming into the school year. And we averaged, again, 25 students, so that's about 50 students that we were able to fit back into Clackamas River Elementary. Estacada Middle School, they actually only had 2 spaces available, and again, we averaged at 30 students per classroom. So again, that is 60, and Estacada High School is at 6 classroom spaces, and that's spaces that we're currently using, whether it's available space again, or we have student services, direct support workers in these classrooms using them as office space. Again, that equates to about 180 students. Our projected enrollment right now, and this is kind of hard to guess, right? We're guesstimating with this information, but based off our population and the growth that we're seeing, River Mill expects to get up to about 510, Clackamas River 420, Estacada Middle School 440, and Estacada High School 498. So where we have a lot of growth is at our elementary, you can see, as well as when River Mill adding that many students has some capacity issues.
Hey, Mike, question for you.
Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, so just wanted to clarify, so with River Mill at 100% capacity, I thought you said that there was still maybe 2 classrooms in there that are used for other non-classroom related. Did I hear that correctly, or is that incorrect?
There are 2 classrooms that were formerly classrooms or a former library that are being used for office space. And we were talking about this morning with our senior staff. The makeup of those rooms aren't ideal for classrooms, and maybe Superintendent Carpenter can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, sure. Excellent question, Director Rydell, and thank you for asking it. So the 2, quote, classrooms that we are considering being inhabited are run by our special education services, as well as our Title I programs, which we receive Title I dollars for. So technically, one could argue that these are spaces being utilized by specialists who are serving kids both in and out of the classroom inside of there. So even if we were to evict those services out of that classroom space, they would need to flow into somewhere else, as those are essential programs, if that helps clarify that question.
That's what I just wanted to clarify, was that we know that a lot of these rooms are being utilized, and how much of that is direct support of students, and how much of it is for lack of a better way to put it, office space that needs to be used, because that does dramatically change what the availability of those rooms is as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely saying that right. And again, just to clarify too, that the projected enrollment, this is what we expect to start in September with. So we believe that in September, River Mill Elementary School will be larger than Estacada High School, which is an anomaly, but it also speaks to the demographic of family who is moving into our community. These are primarily young families with young children at the elementary age. And so as we talk about growth tonight, I think it's important to start first with the type of family and the type of kid moving into our school district.
One other thing, if I could, with regards to capacity, Estacada High School, we're at 84% with 6 classes available. And when you're talking 180 kids, that's keeping the current class size the same, right?
Correct.
And so we would be adding 180 kids to the 498, is that correct?
If we have the ability to with that classroom space.
But isn't this high school, couldn't we technically hold more than that? Because it's one of the schools that was originally designed for 1,000 or 1,200 kids, right?
Yeah, correct.
But it's going to give us a larger cohort size.
It would increase class size, and there are things during the days when that was a 900 student thing, like the boiler room was inhabited as a classroom. There were some other spaces that were classroom that are probably in today's standards not conducive to best learning. Yeah.
Gotcha.
One other thing.
Go ahead.
One other thing, when we talk about capacity of our elementary schools, and I don't have a slide for this, but one thing that is worth considering is what is the best practice elementary school size? I mean, we see up here for projected enrollment, River Mill Elementary is breaking into the 500s. So even if we had the classrooms to house these students, think about what is the ideal number of teachers for a principal to supervise, students for a vice principal to manage. Things like sports challenge where the auditorium and gym is packed, cafeteria is packed. So really the ideal size for an elementary school is in the 400 range of students, and average across Oregon is about 425. So even if we were to add more classrooms at the elementary level, it's still not what research right now has as best practice. So that's another consideration when we talk about capacity, is what is best. These things like gyms, auditoriums, and even staffing capacity of administrators and that small community school feel that we all value start to go away as we pack these schools fuller and fuller. At the elementary level, it's just not what is ideal. There's a reason that we have smaller elementary schools, because that's best practice in that K-5 range.
Can I kind of piggyback on that, if everybody can hear me okay? I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring up this question, and there is a little bit of difference between River Mill and Clackamas Elementary as far as numbers are concerned. And I don't know if there's information out there to where the growth is actually occurring between those two schools. Is that something that we're going to be talking about, or is this proper time to bring up maybe the boundary changes?
Yes, thank you, Director Snyder. I think this is an appropriate time and an appropriate space to have this conversation. In a meeting I had actually with Chair Wheeler, who informed me of some of this information, it is expected, we believe, that over 1,000 homes will be ready to be built upon over the course of the next calendar year.
No, a little bit longer than that. The lots will be platted in that time frame.
Okay, so lots will be there, so the availability will be there. For those who are familiar with our school district boundary, it does appear that the neighborhood development and the growth is going to occur really between the Campanella Estates and our back 20 acres project all the way to Deuce Road from the old Eagle Creek Highway, and then it will extend, I'm going to say north because in my mind I'm thinking that's up, but what direction is that going towards the airport?
That's going to be east.
East. So where the sun rises, we're headed east to support that growth. And so I think you're asking a very fundamental question. We know that Clackamas River has some capacity to gain kids. I'm a little bit hesitant from the standpoint of, is that me that's doing that? Okay. I'm a little bit hesitant from the standpoint of trying to relocate students who are already enrolled in their current elementary schools, as we really want our community to stay engaged and involved there. However, I do think it would be wise of our school board team and your superintendent ultimately to probably start drawing some circles around some of those new developments and have those new families who are electing to go into those potentially to reboundary them to Clackamas River to augment some of that growth. That, however, is a temporary solution because ultimately we're going to reach capacity at Clackamas River as well. And so I would like to have a conversation at some point about thinking proactively of how can we as a school district potentially negotiate a deal with a new land developer to potentially earmark some land inside the middle of one of these new developments for the opportunity for school growth in our future.
And just to clarify the lot count there, that would include the 416 or give or take a handful of lots out at Deuce Road. I think Holt Homes has that development. There's two of them that were released, recently approved in just outside Campanella Estates. One was 128, one was 118 lots. I think there's two different subdivisions of 43 lots up out Cascadia Ridge. And then there are a lot of infill between the Holt Homes development and those 150 lots out on Hinman Road. So all said and done, it's predicted that 1,000 lot mark will be in the next year, including what's already being developed.
So, so I know you talked about long-term versus short-term, so are we considering short-term, meaning this next year, doing some of those circles of the new developments for those new families that aren't already in this, in this current boundaries, and doing that for this next year to rebalance?
Yeah, I think it would be wise of us to have that conversation really probably throughout the rest of this year and through this summer. I don't believe that, those homes will be ready to go to inhabit new families before the start of the school year. But that being said, I think timing-wise, Director Shibahara, your question is right and your timing is right. We probably need to make that determination before this school year starts so that when those houses begin to develop during the school year, the boundaries have already been established. Great question.
And now we'll turn over to our Director of Finance, Christina Weinert.
Yeah, I'm doing all of that. So we still have, is our time up?
Our time is not up. We continue, we have about 20 more minutes.
Okay.
You want to keep that conversation going?
Yeah, until Director Wheeler moves us in a different direction. Yep.
One thing we need to dive into is, I guess we're going to get to that on E. I feel like there's more to this conversation we were talking about earlier. What are we missing here?
Sure. I think that's it, and we can circle back because this same stuff will come up really in all of the areas. This is kind of to get us started, just to kind of give our board an idea of where we're at with growth and a true update on our capacity as well as our predictions. So
Okay. Well, with that, let's just go. I guess the logical next thing is just follow the agenda, and we can move to item C on the agenda, which is Eagle Creek and Summit Learning Charter, also known as Eagle Creek Elementary School, or the school formerly known as Eagle Creek Elementary School. And it obviously is in Eagle Creek, away from the growth, but currently inhabited by a fully functioning charter school that this Escada School District has a partnership with, and currently ranks in the top 1, 2, 3 in the state as far as charter schools go in a lot of ways. So with that, it's going to go to Superintendent Carpenter.
yeah, thank you. And Chair Wheeler, you said that just perfect. So Eagle Creek is currently home to Summit Learning Charter. It's the third largest virtual charter school in the state of Oregon, and it has the #1 graduation rate for charter schools in the state of Oregon. They've been an excellent partner that has really led to some great things that reaches all kids throughout the state. One of the biggest misconceptions about Summit Charter is that it houses students from the Escada School District there, and in fact that is really a pretty big myth. 90% of those 1,400 students attend that school from all over the state of Oregon. Really only about 10% of Estacada's students attend Summit Charter, or about 140 of those students. So really it has been an excellent pathway for students throughout the state of Oregon to engage in true virtual and on-campus learning. During normal times, Eagle Creek is open on Tuesdays and Thursdays for those 1,400 students and their families to get engagement and enrichment opportunities, and it really has been an excellent partnership through this process. And they have moved into Eagle Creek Elementary School since 2014. And Maggie, if you'll change the slide there. So ultimately, what the Estacada School District has averaged really over the last 4 years is the Estacada School District has averaged around $2.15 million in profit due to this partnership. And I'll tell you how this works. So ultimately, the Estacada School District receives 20% funding of each and every child who is enrolled in Summit Learning Charter through the contract and partnership that we have. So Summit gets 80% of the revenue of the child, the Estacada School District gets 20% of the revenue. But we also have a growth cap. And because Summit Learning Charter has become so popular throughout the state of Oregon, any child that they enroll that is over that ceiling that we've agreed upon and negotiated with, the Estacada School District ultimately receives 40% of revenue for that. So as COVID closed schools and tens of thousands of students throughout the state of Oregon enrolled in online charter schools, our very own Summit Learning Charter also saw a considerable boost. And every child who went to Summit during this pandemic, 40% of that revenue went to the Estacada School District. And so ultimately, at $2.15 million, the Estacada School District over the last 4 years has almost received around $9 million. Now, what do we do with those funds is that $9 million really pays for and compensates 20 teachers inside our school district. So without that partnership, we aren't able to offer the great services that we're able to and do things greater than a typical school district our size, and it's because of this. If we were to remove Summit from Eagle Creek to open up that third elementary school that is needed, we would need to reduce our workforce by about 20 teachers, or we'd need to basically cut 1 month of school in order to offset the financial gains that we get from this partnership. And so I just wanted to really kind of bring that up for conversation and allow the board to comment on this, because I know that several community members approach us when we talk about growth and ask us about Eagle Creek. And the truth of the matter is Eagle Creek is full of a very thriving charter school. They've been a profitable financial partner to the Estacada School District to allow us to increase our services to families. And also Summit Charter has invested of their own money a little over $1 million to take care of that facility and be a good steward of Eagle Creek. And so it looks beautiful over there for our community members who do drive by that on a regular basis. And ultimately the demand of the growth, like Director Snyder was referring to, is not necessarily towards Eagle Creek. It's still inside the city limits of Estacada. And so it would be a challenge and detrimental for us to lose such a profitable business for us in the future.
Well, and Ryan, I think the other thing, just to throw out there for the group, if we did look at reopening that building as an elementary school for the school district, looking at how to draw boundaries and where we would be pulling kids from where they live to then have them attend school at that location, it would dramatically change the landscape. So it's not like we go back and say, well, these are the families that were at Eagle Creek previously, and we just go back to that set because the growth has not been in that area. It's going to be a much different geographical map area that is then sectioned off and going to that school. So it is definitely a conversation that is warranted and a legitimate conversation to have out there within the community. It would be great to have a little more information on what that would look like, so that as we look at boundaries and what that does, as we're talking to community members that have an opinion and want to share that opinion, that we could share back some factual information around boundaries and who would attend potentially what schools, because that can also impact perception on that as well.
And potentially in a second round of information, and maybe you already know this, Superintendent Carpenter, is what's the tipping point, like from an ADM standpoint, to offset what we're getting there? I mean, how many students does it take to really open an elementary school and have it survive on its own and keep it staffed and pay the utilities? I mean, is it something that's 15 years from now in a growth pattern, or next year? I mean, certainly not next year, but it'd be an interesting piece of information to add to the conversation if we come back to it.
Yeah, very good question. And actually, I could probably run some quick numbers on that just to kind of give you a rough idea of how many students in growth it would take to offset that. and what that would look like. And again, Director or Vice Chair Rydell, I think your point is noble too, and I think that we should probably, as we further this dialogue and conversation, maybe bring back out the old elementary school boundaries of when Eagle Creek was in existence, so that some families could identify what school they may or may not go to if Eagle Creek was back on there, because I know that a lot of our families, specifically in that Eagle Creek and some of those roads up there past Curran and on Deuce Road, they've become so engaged and involved in their community school currently that change may look different as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
I have a question about how much, lumber and everything's all out of whack right now, but how much would it normally have cost to build an elementary school that would have a capacity of around 420 as the, best practice?
That's an excellent question, Director Shibahara, and we reached out to a couple of firms today, as well as our partner, Oregon City School District, who recently just built a brand new elementary school due to a successful bond campaign. And right now, the going rate for a standard elementary school in Clackamas County, Oregon is $31 million. And they believe that the cost escalation of that will increase by 10% each year. So for every year that we don't address those capacity needs, could be a potential 10% escalation. So a couple of years from now, that could be a $40 million elementary school.
And Ryan, just to clarify too, that dollar amount does not include land acquisition, anything like that. That is just the construction cost of putting up the new building.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Director Berman, in my calculations, that would, in order for us to offset the lost revenue from Eagle Creek Elementary School, it would be roughly 245 new students is what that profit equates to.
Thank you. And to bolster your numbers on elementary schools, 2 of them just got awarded to 2 different contractors in the Hermiston area for closer to 40. That's a right now number as of about a week ago for a basic elementary.
Good information.
And then Ryan, just to clarify again, that number of 245 students, that replaces the revenue, but that doesn't say that school is self-sufficient from a revenue and cost perspective for teachers and other staff that is in the building. That would dramatically increase that number to make it self-sufficient. Am I correct in assuming that?
You're saying that absolutely right.
Yeah, thank you. That's good info, and Summit is certainly a wonderful neighbor to this point. So, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking back to even with the growth being specific to the Superintendent Carpenter alluded to within the city limits, even if we were to look at the Eagle Creek boundaries, essentially aren't those kids essentially going to be older anyhow, and they would be in the middle and high school age and would be on. If there's, I don't know what the sales are from a real estate perspective in that area, but I guess that's, even looking at the boundaries there, to me wouldn't have a lot of effect or meaning because there's no growth there, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, you're saying that absolutely correctly. That the growth in the boundaries, it's heavily centered towards the back half of our high school River Mill Elementary property. And so, a lot of those families already are engaged. And Chair Wheeler, anything to expand on that?
No, I mean, everybody's saying that correctly.
Yeah.
When you put 43 lots on 10 acres next to city limits, it's far different than one person living on 10 acres out in Eagle Creek or the Springwater area or up in the surrounding areas. And so that's where you're going to get your mass population growth.
Yeah. I would add, just because, we obviously still utilize Eagle Creek as a school-owned facility, and in several of the last few years, Eagle Creek's athletic fields have been available for the community to practice youth soccer, practice youth baseball, and that's always been, from the voices of our community, an extremely unpopular location, as it's just an inconvenience for families who are, again, primarily inside the Estacada city limits or closer surrounding areas. And so I don't believe, other than just maybe a few occasions, have even some of our own local activities occurred at Eagle Creek, because the families, the families themselves are not supportive of the drive out there to support those youth athletics as well.
One other thing to keep in mind with the building and the site itself is it's not hooked up to a municipal water supply or sewer system. And I know in years past there's been issues with the well and the capacity when you start putting 400 kids and, you know, if that's 800 times the toilet flush a day and dishes and everything else that goes along with it, that septic and well, we're struggling at times. I imagine they're remedied to a certain extent at this point in time, but it is a cost that would need to be bared at some point if that was to be considered a reopen to a full-time.
Oh, and I would take that one step further, Chair Wheeler, that there, to my understanding, it's been remedied based on the amount of usage that is in that building at this point in time, but that building does not support several hundred students every single day. And so even though we may say, hey, it's in decent shape now, it's in decent shape now for that building being open to students 2 days a week. How many are there? How many spend the day compared to 200-300 people all day, every day? And it's on what basically a house is on, right? It's on a septic system and a well. And so that is something that would need to be mitigated significantly, and frankly, I don't even know if we have a really good understanding of what that would need to be, because it's not being used in the way that we would intend to use it as a fully functioning elementary school.
Well said. So I think
Hey Ryan, can you do me a favor? Can you get a little more on your mic? It's still hard to hear you.
Yeah, you betcha.
Thank you.
So Chair Wheeler, I think for Section C, again, as we just kind of get the conversation started, again, we're talking about our growth and capacity, where we're currently at. We've addressed some of the concerns as well as some of the advantages of how the Estacada School District has been innovative in using its Eagle Creek facility. And then ultimately, is there any other questions, or is there anything else I could do from your superintendent standpoint to potentially get more information for the board or share with the community on Eagle Creek?
I don't know how we get, I don't want to say the narrative, but the information out there that capacity is now an issue. And start beating that drum that, hey, here's where we're at, here's where we're headed, and I guess here's the remedy if we get there. We all understand the issue, and it's a good issue to have, but to have the community at large understand it and have some skin in the game, part of the conversation, I guess. I guess we can talk about how do we communicate that. Obviously, we have a communication director here that can get some of that out. I think some of our communications, I don't want to say fall on deaf ears, but we're telling it to people that already know. We already know, the elementary kids already know that, or their parents already know that there's a capacity issue. Because some of the kids, as we're allowed to go back to 3-foot social distancing, can't go back because of capacity issues.
Right.
And so it's getting beyond that bridge and going to the grandparents and the kids, or the people that moved out here from elsewhere that don't understand the school district fully. So I guess formulating a plan to start getting that information out is a step that we need to take. I'm not a communications person, so I'm going to leave it to the professionals.
I would take it one step further than that. A piece of information I feel is strongly that we need to have as a board is what if Eagle Creek Elementary was reopened as an elementary school within the Esser School District, where would those students come from? And what would that look like? Because I do think that's a pivotal part of this communication, and I appreciate when the community is saying, hey, we have an asset, have we really looked to make sure that this asset is fully utilized? But that is information that I feel we need to have so that we can be productive in those conversations to say, we do have an asset, as we just talked through some of how that asset is already working very, very well for not only our community, but for the education of students in the state of Oregon is working very well for them. But how would that directly impact this community and what would that look like? That to me is probably some of the more important statistical information that I need to have some of those conversations that I know people want to have at this time.
Thank you. Vice Chair Rydell, I will get right on that. I think that is an important one. I agree.
Another thing to add is the day-to-day cost in that, as far as we currently have 2 elementary principals and a vice principal that shares time at each. Is that correct?
That's correct. However, this year, due to growth, we have utilized some additional growth dollars to add an additional vice principal. So we'll have 1 at each building next year.
Okay. And so right now we have 4 principals, vice principals, we have counselors, we have cooks, we have custodians, we have the maintenance cost, lights, everything else that goes into it, as well as the transportation cost. And you can't put a dollar amount on it, but the campus orientation of all the buildings being close, and if something needs to be run or we need to move bodies to a building, it's easy and quick. It's not a hour-long project to drive to and from. So it would be interesting to get a fully loaded cost if we were to bring that back up to speed and staff it accordingly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually probably one point that we haven't talked about is the advantage we as a district have efficiency-wise of having a campus-type atmosphere right now, where we're able to utilize multiple shared resources because of the proximity of school building to school building. So by opening up something in Eagle Creek definitely is a detriment to the services that we can provide because it can't be shared as efficiently. Like you said, I can't remember what it is. It's a 20-minute drive, 15-minute drive from Estacada to Eagle Creek. And that is a challenge in terms of sharing resources, whereas maybe a different location or something along those lines closer to the campus would allow us to more efficiently share our resources and our staff.
I almost see that as like a pros and cons kind of idea too. If we're wanting to present it from a positive standpoint, here's what, could be positive if we were to get Eagle Creek back, but on the negative side, I think we've addressed a lot of those, or the cons, and there's more money that would need to go into that, and time and effort and everything under the sun, it sounds like. So I don't know if maybe looking at it from that perspective might help too, with the communication side of things.
Thank you, Director Snyder. I think that's good, and that should be a part of our story and our discussion, is sharing that. And Maggie, were you able to understand that so that as we communicate what that might look like?
Director Snyder, just as a heads up, you're coming across as kind of fuzzy in the room here. I don't know if the rest of the people in the Zoom room are hearing the same thing.
A little bit.
Don't stop talking, though. We appreciate your input.
Yes.
One other thing that isn't anywhere on this agenda, but I'm just going to throw a giant curveball out here, is years ago, probably 3-4 years ago, it's been longer than that, 6 or 7 years ago, when we went away from Eagle Creek Elementary, and we were talking about how to organize the elementaries. An idea was a K2, 3, 5 organization. I don't see how it directly helps this, other than you might be able to shift some kids grade level to grade level, and be able to, maybe as the kids get older, pack more kids in a classroom a little more readily. But Ryan, could you speak to that idea and tell me why it's bad?
Honestly, it's not bad. It's not a long term because we think the growth will regardless outlast the building and infrastructures that we currently have. But honestly, Chair Wheeler, that's an option that we haven't necessarily explored the numbers or revisited again since that big committee that we did, 4 or 5 years ago in terms of that. But I would actually entertain coming back to the board with what those numbers and options look like, because I think from a short-term perspective, we might be able to be creative in how we combine that. But at the end of the day, no matter what, the growth is going to blow up both of those buildings and both of those grade levels in that manner.
I'm going to take my mask off for a sec here. Again, while we're...
You are farther than 6 feet from all of us, so that is a safe play with glass barriers.
I know that Vice Chair Rydell spent some time in Las Vegas with his significant other teaching at an elementary school, if I'm correct, in a shifted type schedule where they had a A schedule, B schedule, C schedule because of high capacity issues? Is that right?
Yeah, it was, they ran year round, so they ran on tracks, which we had also talked about when we were looking at scheduling. But it was due to a capacity issue that, when we lived in Las Vegas, 6,000 people moved to Las Vegas every month. So 6,000 people every month moving in. And so they couldn't build schools fast enough. They couldn't hire teachers fast enough. And so the only way that district in the entire Las Vegas Valley is one school district. So if you think Portland Public is big, think again, because the Las Vegas school district, at least at that time, was ginormous. But that's how they had to do it. And there was kids in every classroom every day of the year, essentially, because they didn't have space. So, I mean, it is something. I know from a community standpoint, when we tested it out here and talked to folks, it wasn't necessarily the first priority or the first like that people would do. But that is certainly one to look at because you can have different tracks of different students there on different times. I don't know what the operating cost is. Ryan, you could answer more to that because there still is a certain number of contract time for teachers. So just because you're changing when students are there, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to significantly add to your workforce to cover those additional days. And so that isn't something that I'm super privy to at this point in time, that it would be something we'd have to look at.
It's an outside the box idea, no doubt about it. It would be more expensive out the front end, either to add contract days and/or add more additional staff to work the swing shift and some of those things to accommodate all students. But it's definitely a challenge. It's also important, I think, to talk in this discussion that growth is a pretty normal thing. It's new to Estacada, but very common outside of the Portland metro area. And I think of a couple schools, for example, like when the brand new North Clackamas or Clackamas High School was built about a decade ago, the time that high school had finished, they were already ordering portables because they had exceeded that growth in that process. And so, again, this is new to Estacada, but the idea of portables, the idea of blowing out capacity. I can't wait to introduce Christina Weinert in the next segment to our board. But she was just telling me that, the Reynolds School District in their last bond needed to build 3 brand new elementary schools due to growth and capacity. So as we talk about the potential for one, there are several other communities similar to ours who have already experienced this boom. And their community was able to rally around and support that. And so I'm excited this is only the beginning of that conversation, but I'm excited to engage our community as we become one of those next communities that deals with that growth.
All right.
Can I ask just one last comment about the K2, 3, 5? And I was definitely a part of those conversations, and I saw I thought of it as an interesting way to kind of almost pull the community together, as we go through the schools together. My only concern is knowing that we're going to be over capacity right away. And then it's like, what do you do if we do get a 3rd elementary school and then we have to reconfigure again? And it just feels like the direction, in my opinion, the direction that our community is going in that direction of splitting K2, 3, 5 doesn't feel like the right path at this point if we're wanting to add a 3rd elementary school.
Yeah, you're saying that accurately. It would be a major change for a short term to prepare for another major change ultimately.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and continue the conversation as we move through the agenda here. We can always circle back, and all of these topics are interrelated, so we'll more than likely touch on them again. The next item is the Esser funds update. And these are the better known as the stimulus dollars from the federal government. Esser 1 and 2 were under the last administration, and Esser 3 is under the current administration. And with that, I'll also introduce Christina Weinert, our new Director of Finance, as well as Superintendent Carpenter are going to take this one.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce formally
I stole that.
Christina Weinert to our great board team. She has been here now for, I think, 2 weeks, although it's starting to feel like it's been longer than that, 3 weeks. That's why, because it's been 3 weeks. But already has made an instant impact both to our financial services, the camaraderie, and teammate, a great teammate that she's already been to several of our leaders and our building principals. I'm excited for you to get to see her talents and expertise. We're so grateful, I feel like, to have hired someone with this talent in the middle of a school year, and her willingness and ability to come and join us midstream to help us establish next year's budget and to help us work through some of these great growing pains and challenges that we as a community get to face, being that we're a growing community, which is a great problem to work through and challenge to work through. She comes to us from the Reynolds School District, and so I'd like to publicly thank the Reynolds School District for allowing Christina to join us mid-year. That's been a very great teammate from that perspective as well, and she is going to talk to us and our community tonight about what we've done with this federal stimulus money and how we've invested that in helping our schools open safely, keeping our schools open safely, investing in technology, and how we can use some of this one-time monies to support the growth that we're talking about tonight. So Christina, take it away.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Carpenter. I am very, very excited to be here and to serve with you and the board and support the community of Escoquita. I want to talk a little bit about our different Esser monies. Our Esser 1, which we sometimes call CARES, the CARES grant, that was awarded to us in late spring last year, 2020. We were eligible to start spending the money as soon as March 13th. And we used that money to buy personal protective equipment to directly respond to COVID. And also we added an FTE to support us during the COVID. That grant was fully spent last year, 2019 and 20. The second part of that first stimulus was the CDL gear grant. And that money was to be used directly for technology support for students. And you can see that we did buy student laptops, and we were able to provide our students with internet and hotspots. And that grant is fully spent, and we spent it this year. Thank you, Maggie. The next one that we are currently in the process of still spending is the Esser 2. We actually received our award amount in January of this year, 2021. But again, we could go back as soon as July 1st or even earlier to spend that. And the first thing that we did is we allotted $75,000 to each of our schools into our operations team, and we were able to buy CDL meal delivery and breakfast for in the classroom. We were able to buy student Chromebooks, iPads, and accessories to support those. We were able to buy also staff devices, an auto scrubber, and bottle filling stations and water bottles, and additional PPE. We also allotted a portion of that for our video conferencing equipment and classroom setup. We were able to do a contract for DDCs at the middle school and River Mill, and GPS bipolar ionizations And you will have to ask Michael what that is, because I'm just the finance person. But that's the systems in all classrooms, and error flow measurement and verification. And then we were also supported our teacher staffs with two roaming subs, or subs to support for absences. And then just last week, we received our allotment that we were gonna get for our Esser 3 grant. And this amount is just over $2 million. So we're very excited to use this money to address the concerns that we are discussing today and other needs in direct response to COVID. Just going through these, we're looking at portables not to exceed 6,000. We're considering 2 buildings for classrooms and 1 building that will have 6 offices. We're going to get a generator to support district internet and phone. So when we go down in electricity here, we still are able to have internet and phones. And also at the high school, our kitchen cooler, so that we can keep our food cold if we ever lose power again. We're currently have a contract for CNAs to support our buildings, and we are liking to continue that for next year. We're going to continue to need PPE as we move forward. And then access control, and that's building card readers. We would like to consider that for Rivermill, Clackamas River, and the middle school. And then access points, and those are those little, those spaceships for Wi-Fi. We would like to get some more of those. And then most importantly, the contingency. We're asking for a $500,000 contingency to address any concerns that come up during COVID. And also, this grant is eligible. We have until 2024 to spend it. So we really think this is important to hold on to this to address our capacity needs, and as things arrive that we'll be able to address it. And final, we're looking at one-time money for textbooks adoption. Next year, we're looking at an English language arts and an English language development.
So great job. So before we open it up again to discussion and questions, it is important because I know that the federal stimulus money obviously comes with controversy, right? And opinions on both sides of the necessity of those allocations of federal funds. I will state, though, that Esser 1 and Esser 2 have been absolutely critical for us to be able to execute the best-in-class virtual school and hybrid learning models that we've been able to offer and really play a leadership role in the state of Oregon. I'm very proud of Estacada in its conscientious and focused efforts to really prioritize these one-time dollars to meet the needs of our families and to meet the needs of our students and teachers during an unprecedented time for us to quickly learn and adjust of how to educate our students during this pandemic. If we didn't have these dollars, each of these dollars would be coming from our general fund, ultimately impacting our classroom and our services that we were able to offer. So I'm very thankful and grateful to our taxpayers and to our local community, because with these funds, we were able to provide the best service that we could muster during this time, the wildfire, and the ice storm as well. With the Esser 3 funds, this is really a proposal. It's nothing more than that. We wanted to share with the board and our community the school district's thinking of how best to be innovative and think ahead. A lot of school districts are in a different financial perspective where ultimately they need to utilize this money to pay or offset for labor and some of those other issues. The Estacada School District is fortunate enough to be currently in a sound financial position that this allows us to make the necessary improvements and adjustments to set us up successfully for the future. So as we talk about growth, this is an opportunity for us to potentially utilize one-time federal funds ultimately to address some of our growth and capacity if there is social distancing that is required, which I'm not sure if it is yet or not for next fall, our ability to have more classroom space will allow us to have more kids come to school on campus, which we currently can't do at River Mill at the moment because our capacity is so great we exceed the 3 feet social distancing. And so by adding additional classroom space will allow us, regardless, to have all students return on campus who wish to do so. The generators are important because during our ice storm, the Carpenter family's home lost power for 7 consecutive days. We're hearing rumors and reports that this summer, during wildfire danger, the power could be interrupted more often. Obviously, we have thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of food stored in our coolers, and ultimately to be responsible to taxpayer and public funds, it would be to our best interest to install a generator to make sure that we're keeping that food in good shape and order so that we can serve our children and ultimately serve our community in the event of a crisis. The other important thing I do want to talk about is really 2 things. The access control at River Mill, Clackamas River, and EMS. Our school board, we've been talking about trying to improve our security really for the last 4 or 5 years. We asked for this security upgrade in our failed bond last fall, but the security still continues to remain a high priority in our buildings and facilities master plan. And so utilizing these dollars to check a big box of what we've been trying to do from a community perspective for multiple years, we see this as an opportunity to upgrade our security and access control at our 3 remaining buildings. And then last but not least, we just don't know what lies ahead of us in terms of COVID, in terms of variants, in terms of state regulations, in terms of federal regulations. And so we want to make sure that we're setting some of this one-time money aside to allow our district to continue to be flexible and meet the needs of our community during this crisis and pandemic. So I just kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper, but great job, Christina, in sharing those things. And at this point, I'd love for the board to comment or ask questions or kind of help guide us in the direction of how best to utilize this one-time money.
I'll go ahead and open the discussion up here. One question that, as we were running through that list, you were mentioning the social distancing. If we continue to add capacity at any of the schools, do we limit the amount of food that can be served, say, through a gym, or the amount of PE that can be conducted in a inside environment in the 1 or 2 months of the good weather we have during the school year?
Yeah, yes is the answer to that question. We're already at that capacity with the current enrollment that we have. So the challenges with the CDC guidance and the Ready School Safe Learning guidance that our school district is required to follow is even though students in the classroom can be 3 feet apart from each other, when they're eating with their masks off, they must remain 6 feet apart from each other. So by bringing as many students back on campus as we possibly can, we're already beyond capacity in our current eating facilities, primarily at the elementary school and middle school. Thankfully, our building principals and teacher leaders have been innovative in different locations that kids are conducting the eating and how they're doing breakfast and PE and recess. But it's a legitimate question that you're asking. And yes, capacity in those areas are going to continue to be a challenge for us.
I've got a quick question on the generator line. The chart's not up anymore, but I think it said it was for the high school. Does that imply that all the food for all the schools is stored at the high school, and we wouldn't lose it in other locations?
Yes, that's correct. Our high school coolers are the largest coolers in the district, and we can bring them, all the food over there, as well as supplies at the high school. Our main internet, MDFs and IDFs support all the other schools. So that's why we decided to do it just at the high school, which would support the remaining schools.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I can tell you the budget's a little light there, just from projects we're doing in Salem right now. But great idea, and I think that's good use of that first line item on portables. If that's what you're saying we need, you know, I support you. So, rest of the line items look like good smart ideas too, especially having some contingency, because we don't really know. We know we have growth coming, but we don't know what the state and the federal government's going to pull on us. So I like the idea of some contingency as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Berman, and we appreciate that support greatly. And I agree with that support from the perspective of we know that we need to add additional classroom space. This is an opportunity really for us to add that additional classroom space at no charge to the general fund. And so we can provide this growth opportunity without impacting teachers or classrooms or services to students. So this is a one-time opportunity that we'd like to be proactive about utilizing.
Is there a way we can bring that list back up? I was just asking to get the list put back up there on the screen.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask the same.
One thing that's important to keep in mind is, to some extent, these, maybe not the Esser 3, but the other ones are more of a reimbursement. We had already made a commitment to invest in wireless internet service for the kids, as well as Chromebooks. And so, as we back up into the Esser 1 and 2, I just wanted to make that point and pat ourselves on the back for being proactive on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not really relevant to Esser 3, but it's relevant to the good things we're doing around here.
Yeah. Yep. And that was a community effort too. We need to thank Reliance Connects and other community agencies who helped us quickly set students up during this pandemic to access school as much as possible. So it was a shared endeavor, but again, thanks to this federal stimulus money, we were able to do that at no expense to what we're currently serving our students and families with.
Are these funds, does it have strings attached, meaning can we only use it for technology and, you know, COVID-related things, or can we use it for rusty pipes too?
It is for COVID-related things.
Makes sense.
We have to directly support our students during the pandemic. And part of that is also in learning loss, which is why part of is the English language, the adoption.
Thank you.
What's our current CNA coverage? Is that contracted currently, or is this a new contract service?
Great question. Thank you for asking, Director Shibahara. So during this pandemic, one of the things that we enacted based on employee voice as well as community voice was the need to have medical experts, quote unquote, in each school building to potentially test students, make a good diagnosis of kids who may or may not be symptomatic. At this point, the district, because of our size and opportunity, we only have a 0.5 registered nurse on that. And so as we worked towards opening our schools as fast as we could and as safe as we could, one of the requests from our employees as well as our parents was to have each site to have that medical expert. So we utilized our Student Success Act dollars for this year, the new SSA money, to pay for contract third-party CNA service. And then because it's not wrapped into our current general fund budget, but this is a practice that we know we're going to need to continue for at least one more year, we wanted to wrap this into our Esser $3, as it will help us continue to open, allow our teachers to teach, and if they have concerns of kids, they can send those kids to an expert who can help us with the COVID procedures. Does that help? Thank you.
If we do these access controls at the buildings listed there, what else district-wide needs access control to just be a fully inclusive system?
Everything except the operations bus barn location.
I had made a point to Superintendent Carpenter. We were over by the bus barn after hours the other day. and the gates were locked, and it's already kind of a tight access, as we all know, in there. Is that something that we might be able to piggyback into that, getting access control for those buses to come in and out? And just from a safety standpoint for the drivers themselves, not having to get out of their rigs. You know, if they're coming back from Madras at midnight and it's one driver, it's something to think about.
We definitely could look at that, entertain it, see how much, basically adding the gates that we have at the high school, leading into our shared spaces to those.
Mike, we can't hear you. Or at least I can't.
Yeah, so again, we can look at accessing that information and getting it, bringing it back to the board. Again, it would be looking at a similar gate that we installed over at the high school side for our shared spaces.
One thing that is on our backlog of items, of priorities, is HVAC. What was the dollar amount for that again?
The air conditioning part or general upgrades?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think we've ever gone into the details of what all.
What was the total that was wrapped into the bond?
I think it was $3+ million.
Yeah,
if I remember.
3.79 million. And that upgrades to AC as well, obviously including AC, and upgrades to many of our controls, BLEMO valves that are, pretty expensive.
Gotcha. And it's basically, we've been planning that as a whole system upgrade and not like partial or incremental. It's really needs to be done in one package.
Not necessarily. It does not need to be done in one package. If we wanted to target a school or location, obviously, to say we want to bring AC into this facility, that is something, again, that we can investigate and get information for the board.
Superintendent Carpenter, how much time do two portables buy us, roughly? I mean, we're going to need to keep stacking them in there like cordwood until, we can get a bond passed to build something. I think that's really the only way out with capacity here, but you might have mentioned it earlier, but how much time do we get out of two portables?
Thank you for asking that question. We believe that of the four portables, two portables, 4 total classrooms that we would like to propose to bring onto our school grounds. We believe that on day 1 of the next school year, 2 classrooms will already be full and occupied. And we do expect that probably by year's end, that 3rd and 4th classroom will begin to be inhabited based on the projections of our growth. It's also important to note that we've been growing in enrollment throughout this pandemic, which is unlike most school districts, but we've also lost hundreds of our own students to online adventures, to homeschooling. Some families have chosen to homeschool because of face mask rules or COVID distancing protocols. And so as we begin to open our schools back up and things return to normal, not only will we be able to retain what we've already grown, but we do expect 100 or more kids to return back to the school district that they were at before COVID started.
Thank you.
With that, so the 2 portables that represents 4 classrooms, the 3rd portable that has office space, that I believe the idea is that will also open up additional classrooms. So how many, with the 4 classrooms and the 2 new portables, with that office space portable, how many additional classrooms is that going to open up?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And I think it's important, first of all, to talk about the context of that office space. So people who have been inside the school district for multiple years, in fact, up until about 6 years ago, the Estacada School District had a portable office space containing 6 offices right next to where the district office is. It's currently a vacant piece of grass with stubbed utilities right next to it. That that portable office was from the Trojan nuclear power plant from the 1960s, and so it was an eyesore and it was extremely ugly, which I will verify for. And so my predecessor ordered the removal of that office. That office space was already full and at capacity, and so with the removal of that space and the non-replacement of the office space, those 6 district-level service providers then ultimately began inhabiting classrooms and other office spaces throughout the district. And so as we anticipate growth, because some of it is at the high school, some of it is at the middle school, and some of it is in our elementary schools, as we try to anticipate growth beyond that of just the elementary schools, we believe that it would be to our best interest utilizing this one-time money to pull those resources back to where they historically were, allowing for more space, as well as, because some of this is office space that's in the buildings as well, not just necessarily classrooms. But we see a need, and we're already anticipating a need to continue to further our supports towards mental health, further our supports towards college and career readiness, and further our supports towards some of the other elective and CTE opportunities that we want to invest. And so by pulling those resources back to where they originally were, will allow us to better support kids with specialists and learning service providers to meet the needs of all kids. So I think we would net gain, back to your original question, we would net gain about a classroom or 2, but we would also net gain significant real estate of offices located at the high school, middle school, and elementary schools to put different people in there to better serve our kids that are doing more kid-specific things, if that makes sense.
So two more classrooms, hopefully.
Correct.
Good. So, and I really appreciate the history there, and it is important. But yeah, to talk brass tacks, it's potentially 2 more classrooms. Would be like dropping another portable at one of the elementary schools. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't dropping another portable and not getting the same amount of benefit that we could get out of just putting another one to put classrooms in. You know, if it only frees up one classroom, then is that the best use of it? So if we're getting the same bang for the buck, then it makes sense.
Yeah, and that question came up earlier today too, in a different conversation that I was in, and so you're saying that exactly right, Vice Chair Rydell, and really there are 2 classrooms that are being inhabited by the demographic of what we're referring to, and if you took those people out of that classroom, then ultimately the portables would become classrooms where those offices were being held. And so it would be just to our best advantage to maximize our classroom space to prepare for the growth and consolidate where our district services are to be more efficient in that perspective too. So thank you.
Thank you.
As kids are coming online with and enrolling in kindergarten roundup or whatever the name of it is now, are they being notified of, hey, you're going to be shuffled to this building because we don't have capacity? Are we trying to divert some kids to Clackamas River no matter their address?
Yeah. Yes is the answer to that question, although at this point we're making it voluntary. So as new families come in, and if they live in the Rivermill boundary, we're saying, welcome to Rivermill. We're full. If you would like to go to a place that is not full, please go to Clackamas River. And we have had several families take us up on that, but there are other families who prefer to go to their neighborhood school, and obviously we're going to serve wherever and whoever as they come in. But as they sign the enrollment paperwork, we're trying our best to say Clackamas River is more available or more vacant, and we would prefer that. But at the end of the day, it's the family's choice at this point.
Thank you for that. Board, is there any other questions with regards to Esser and the funding? Sorry.
I don't know if it's Esser related, and Chair Wheeler, I know you've brought this subject up several times, so I feel like we need to bring it up as a group. That idea of portables versus, an annex, like what we have at Rivermill, where there is a permanent structure that is detached from the building as a whole, but we can in that case, we built that structure. There's a gym in there. There's 6 classrooms, I think. Check me on that one. But so that is another potential step for us to take. I don't know if that would. If we've looked at true hard costs, what that's going to be. Don't know if that would even be viable by September. But I do know that there is another option instead of portables of potentially building annex type structures where you would have, like at a river mill, you would have the one that's there now, which is kind of the 5th grade wing, if I recall correctly. You can have another one that's kind of the 4th grade wing that would be out there, and it's actual improvements to the land and stuff that is there for more permanency. So I guess I'll just drop that bomb on the group and walk away. But I know it's come up a few times before, and I didn't want to.
And maybe Chair Wheeler, you can move us to section E in portables, and we'll restart the clock for 40 minutes. And that's a perfect transition into this conversation.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and segue into that then. We'll start talking about the portables in their entirety. We can get into the cost, the placement, how that cost breaks down, where they will ultimately end up, how long it'll take to get them. And one thing that I'd like to know is the lifespan of them once we're engaged in them. So with that, the resident expert on portables is Mike Ware. Come on down.
Yeah, I'm not sure about expert, as I'm learning as I go with the portables, but yes, we are eyeing 2 classroom portables, 2 portables that have 2 classrooms in each of them, as well as an office portable. This picture here is one that we found through the Oregon City School District. They are interested in getting that out of their district as they have new construction. And so they have put it out for a bid for other districts or other companies to submit. This is only a few years old, this portable, and so I wanted to show you, again, being that it's been used, it's pretty well maintained. You can tell from the outside and the inside it looks fairly well. We do have a site visit tomorrow to take a look at this unit. To make sure that it is something that we want to be interested in and going forward with. Timeline, so this one is kind of ready and available. We could pick it up and bring it. We don't have a spot for it to hold it. Even if we were ready to bring it, we would need to have utilities stubbed out as well as a foundation. So we are working with a contractor if we are able to go forward with this to have it stored for a couple months until we're able to have the proper setting and the utilities installed. So this one, in terms of being ready, the Oregon City School District is asking for it to be removed by June 1st. And so we would have it in our hands if we proceeded with this one.
That's aggressive.
Work some magic with some contractors. So this one is not such a pretty picture, but this we couldn't find any other portables. We've been having some troubles finding utilized portables that are in fairly good condition. There are a number of different contractors in the community, outside of the community, Clackamas County, that have portables from different school districts. But to your question on how long they last, some of them are 10 plus years old, are in pretty rough shape. We did find a contractor trying to sell some, went out and did 2 different site visits, just was not in the condition that we were looking for. And essentially we went out to see how much a new one would cost in that timeline. So what you're seeing here is the schematics of a new one. And I should note the previous one here does not have restrooms included in that. This new one does have restrooms included. So there's some opportunity there and some decision making on what classroom would go out there if we proceeded. And so the timeline on these is very, very tight. We essentially need to make a decision very soon, as in the next week or so, to be able to proceed so they can build this unit, get it ready, and bring it out before the start of the school year. So this one is a little more urgent in terms of making a decision if we decide to proceed. Rough cost on this is $194,000.
194?
194,224.
And then improvement costs on top of that, included in that 600,000?
Yeah, any site prep, anything like that, yes. But again, this is brand new, so this, when you say improvement cost, do you mean anything that we would need to do to it, or?
Getting sewer hooked up, power, water, all that stuff.
That would be included in that threshold of 600,000.
I'm sure that this has already been figured out, but as far as ADA accessibility, this thing's obviously 2.5 feet off the ground, not sitting at ground level. So ADA ramps.
Yep, comes with ADA ramps. Same with the Oregon City one has ramps as well and an awning covering. So yes, we would all be ADA accessible for anyone.
And
So,
then-
Mike, when we're, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ken.
Just from a square footage standpoint, just making sure, so it looks like each side is 32 by 27. If there's a restroom or not, we can take that out, but, so 864 square feet without a restroom in there. And so, what's the square footage per occupant at this point in time based on current COVID?
There's currently no square footage requirement with school safe learners. It used to be 35 square feet per student individual, and that's actually a typical practice when you think about childcare or early childcare, but there is no square footage requirement.
Even using that says 25 students, which is right where we expect classroom size to be at the elementary level, even though that's not necessarily a requirement this time.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Again, part of the social distancing hurdle is the cafeteria, recess, PE, rather than the actual classroom. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is the plan that both of these, portables would go to Rivermill?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I'm just gonna change it to a different picture. A better look
It
at
seems that based on availability, I mean, this is somewhat the obvious choice. Some permanent structures for schools I'm working on now, coming out of the ground is 255 to 300 days. You know, for a 8,000, 6,000 square foot type school facility. So from a timing standpoint, it seems portables are more favorable.
Yeah, we agree with that, Director Berman, and that's why we had the authority and moved quickly on this Oregon City portable, because it's inevitable that we need at minimum 2 classrooms, and this was a price that we felt was a good price for us to get the ball rolling on that. However, per Vice Chair Rydell's question, Mike, I might pass this to you, but I know there's some other folks who are savvy with the cost per square foot, but I agree also with Director Berman. There's no way we'd be able to have a different annex or a permanent annex ready to go by September. However, I think cost is also something to think about, and you know, I'm not sure. I know that the annex that we're referring to, it has 4 classrooms and a gymnasium and a bathroom inside of that. I don't know the square footage of that, Mike, and what is the typical cost of square footage, so we can know kind of the difference of what building something like that would look like versus portables.
Yeah, based off square footage from our facilities coordinator, just over 6,000 square feet, 6,500 square feet. And based on the numbers from our architect that had helped us out in Oregon City School District, that's roughly $3.4 million. And that's hard costs, not including the soft costs.
Mike, I'll back you up on that. We just cut on a 10,000 square footer that went for 4.1 for an annex type building.
Well, thanks for the details, appreciate it.
I guess we just,
Nothing permanent's gonna happen between now and January, or now and September, right? As much as we'd love for it to happen, so.
Just
part of the bigger conversation going forward, but again, if those are $4 to $5 million, that's $10 million to build 2 of them. And is that the most effective use of that as opposed to $600,000 to get a school where we would be?
And just the name of these things, portables, I want to keep that in mind. I mean, we got to get serious as a community about, you know, addressing this long term. Portables will get us by for a while, but we need to have a major movement here as a community to take care of it, as well as other issues.
totally agree, and I'm sorry to still hear my fan, but I guess where I feel like even the bond we tried to put through was a Band-Aid, and this is a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. And it breaks my heart that we have to kind of go this route, but I mean, the numbers that I'm hearing, we don't have a choice. But what is, I mean, if we were to get these portables, what's the, I guess, resale value for us, or the benefit when we hopefully, knock on wood, don't need them anymore? I mean, what's going to happen then?
Yeah, that's a very good question. To give you an example, the one that we're looking at, the Oregon City School District, when we started the conversation, the bond manager had said they were looking for about $50,000 for this unit itself. Again, when I brand new, 192,000. After a couple of years, it's dropped down to 50,000. Some of the older ones that we looked at, they were just trying to get them sold for 14,000. Again, dirt cheap, but they were not in any good condition to be able to say that was worth buying.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also like to add, Director Snyder, because your question is very important in two reasons. One, the resale value of that is definitely, it's a steep decline, but our district has not been excellent either at getting rid of portables either. In fact, currently there is one very big eyesore that we're in the process of trying to remove at that place too. And so, as we invest in portables to support the growth, we also do need to have an exit strategy at some point for that. And so it's important to have that conversation. And by the way, we have asked the new Estacada Fire Department if they would participate in burning down that condemned portable, but unfortunately it's just too close to a big structure to do that. So, Mr. Ware, can you give us an update maybe on that one as well?
Yeah, we completed a procurement for that project to fully remove the portable behind the high school. We have selected a contractor, and we're going through the steps to get it removed. We have to do an asbestos report or assessment, so we're getting that completed, and then we will make sure we have a bunch of storage stuff in there, so we get that cleaned out, and then we'll get it removed by no time.
Is our drama department's clothes and stuff in there? I do want to state just for the record that this is like the 9th time that they've had to move their very important outfits, costumes, and set designs too. So maybe inside of this work we can find a more permanent home where those very valuable things to the kids in one of our best programs can live permanently.
Yes, sir.
So I guess back to portables, just looking at the agenda, right? So location. So I don't think we've talked about that as a group, but I think that's an important next step as far as where we can locate these.
Yeah, yep, and I appreciate that. And I think that's a conversation that we definitely need to engage our stakeholders in terms of that location, efficiency next to plumbing and some of those utilities as well. Right now, I just want the conversation about the need to move forward with portables so that we can get that ball rolling, which will ultimately lead us to a bigger dialogue and conversation about the location of those portables, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just on the agenda, so I figured I'd bring it up. But yeah, it makes sense if we need to decide if that's the direction we're going, so that we can have some bigger conversations.
Amen. Thank you.
I wanted to just quickly talk about the office portable. This is not a brand new unit, so this will not take as long for us to acquire. It's basically already built. Obviously, we just need to readjust some of the office settings and spaces. Essentially, what you see here would be what you see in the office layout. Again, ADA access would be placed on one of the doors with a ramp. The second door would have just stairs leading up to it. But for the most part, a shell with a number of offices, a restroom, obviously, an area for people to collaborate and meet with people together.
So do I understand it correctly that this is a used office space, this one's already that you're looking at now?
Correct.
And then, so the one in Oregon City and then one.
Whoever's talking, we can't hear them.
Sorry, Ken. Sorry, Vice Chair. So I didn't know if we just wanted to clarify we were talking about I call it used office portable, one from Oregon City, and then a new one. All three of those?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So the not to exceed 600,000 would include 3 total structures an addition of 4 classrooms and 6 office spaces. Which I believe should get us through next year.
Okay. I don't see item F on here. Oh, I do. It's adjournment, but let's make believe item E.1.0. I think we really need to consider a bond and how to get there. It's the elephant in the room. It's the solution to the greater problem. And every time we don't pass a bond, we all go, well, it was for a reason. And I kind of feel the same way about the one we just failed in November of 2020, that it was heavily weighted towards EHS. The other schools all got a little sprinkling of things, but we didn't really address capacity any further than these portables will. So somehow we need to shift the mindset of the community collectively and do what we need to do with the bond and add some capacity at the elementary level. Whether that's annexes, a full-on school. Ultimately, a full-on school is what we're going to do by the sound of things.
Well, and it is a major shift, right? For the last 6-7 years, we've talked about bond in high school and what we need to address, and the reality is, from a capacity issue, from a community issue, we need another elementary school. That's the most critical need at this point in time. So it's going to represent a shift in priority, which we didn't have the capacity issue 7 years ago. When we first started looking at that, that wasn't the biggest issue that we had. It is a change, and it's one that, especially with 1,000 new lots that are going to be ready to rock and roll in the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. Now is the time to make that shift and understand that the concerns with the high school and some of the concerns with the middle school and upgrades to existing buildings don't go away. But where's the growth coming and how are we going to address it?
Is there an opportunity for us to do a deep dive into bond? I feel like we haven't done it. I feel like we've kind of talked about it, that other things keep, trumping it as priority, but I feel like it's time. We have to dig into and review what happened, what could we do differently next time. I mean, there's stuff that I know was out of our control, but I do agree with everyone that we really need to start talking about it again.
If I'm not mistaken, we weren't able to get the data that we were hoping for to be able to analyze all that, which was a big issue, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you are saying that correctly, Director Snyder. And one thing I would propose is maybe in the next couple of weeks that we have maybe put another workshop together where we can more specifically talk about that. But at the same time, you're right. So we've looked, in fact, we had Chair Wheeler come and join us at the district office maybe a month or two ago, and there is no breakdown data that the county has provided in terms of the vote breakdown and the data and statistics. The only one that we could find from the failed 2016 bond was a breakdown from David Bugney, and it was his own personal breakdown of how things went, is the only thing we could find.
So even if we don't have that information, I still feel we need to do a debriefing. I don't feel like we've done, any evaluation of, kind of strategy moving forward.
And I think one thing we need to consider is pick your number, whether it's 600, 800, 1,000 new lots coming online, and these are all supposedly, well, not all, but a majority of them are going to be younger families that are going to be enduring the capacity issues. Hopefully, those would be voters that we can reach out to and hope sway some of the heavier weighted precincts that maybe didn't vote the way we needed to pass a bond. and we've said it all along with regards to voting, we're never going to sway the fiscally conservative, don't raise my taxes, longtime Estacadians, or even the people that think that way that have moved here recently. So I think we need to start really beating that drum of, hey, new families, the reason you came here is to get out of the Portland area or whatever school district you were at. We're doing a outstanding job. One thing that comes with that is all these new people, and you need to help us by passing a bond.
Yeah.
But engaging them, those families, is going to be the hardest hill to overcome. So, I think Maggie, you had presented something to us not that long ago. 1,600 new voters since the 2020 election. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a substantial number of voters. I think more people registered to vote, but additionally we have had a large influx. I think it was actually about 1,200, but still a substantial number. We were sending out a lot more pamphlets to the community, which is exciting.
So,
We'll have to have a barbecue in Zone 5, it sounds like.
say that again, Joe? Or Director Berman?
I think we have to have a barbecue in Zone 5.
I also will say I haven't done a full breakdown of the spreadsheet yet, but just from a quick analysis of the new voters, we are skewing at least a little bit younger, which generally helps us with our voters and the direction the votes go.
Christina, with your bond passing experience, and that transition of out of old buildings or under capacity buildings into newer capacity, how does that look from a utilization of portables and moving of the kids to make that as seamless as possible? And what's your experience on that?
Well, I was at Oregon City when they passed their bond after multiple failures. So you were buying one of their portables that they did prior to passing the bond. They got 2 portables at Gardner and 2 portables at Ogden, and they were using that to staff because they were busting out at the middle school level. So that's it.
Did Oregon City just pass one bond, and it's all inclusive?
They passed the one that built the high school, like early 2000s, and then they passed just the one recently that they're doing, the one middle school and one remodel.
Okay. Was it a big sticking point as far as putting kids in portables and shifting them around from building to building, or was it all just new expansion? 'Cause I'm not that familiar with Oregon City on how the...
Yeah, we made it as part of the process of moving towards a bond. That was part of our communication. This is a stepping stone. It's not our permanent, because that would be hard for families. But we just said this is our stepping stone as we're getting ready and preparing our buildings and locations for the bond, and the buildings. And
Okay. I think going back to 2016 and the failure, it can be attributed to a multitude of things, but that was one thing that was a big question mark, is where are my kids going to go in the interim?
Yes.
So communicating that in the right way is going to be important.
well, remember Milwaukee High School had a field of portables while they tore down their building and rebuilt it. That's high school, but.
Yeah.
Our high school, that they were putting in portables and did half the building at portables, and then transition that way, but that was high school too.
It's not an uncommon thing that we're encountering. It's just new to us, and it's a new challenge for us.
Okay. Well, what are we at? 8:43 now. We've started the conversation.
Yeah.
How do we continue and steer the conversation to the most productive direction?
So here are some next steps that I see. You've had, first of all, the opportunity to review our proposal for the Esser 3 funds, and I'd love to work individually if questions or concerns or comments from board members about some of the things that we're proposing in Esser 3. Ultimately, if Esser 3 looks good to the board of directors, then in the preceding school board meetings, we're going to start coming to the board with RFPs because those obviously exceed the expenditures that's going to require board approval to approve that. First and foremost, next Thursday, most likely the approval of the not to exceed $600,000 for the purchase of portable classrooms. And then from a different communications perspective, I would love just some direction that you can send your superintendent so that I can start targeting our communications and that our communications about growth is aligned as we engage our community about future-focused thinking of how we can incorporate that. One example that I think is clever is I would like to, and this was brought up by a board member that I'd like to share with other board members, is as these new developments continue to be proposed to the city council and the city development committees, some developers are going to be asking the Estacada School District to defer excise tax that typically goes to the school district for construction excise. With your permission, I would like to potentially pull aside one or maybe two of these developers who are interested in not exercising the SDC taxes to the school district, potentially in exchange for donating property inside one of these new residents to provide potential land and or space to the school district to prepare us for that growth. So what I mean in a different way is, can we offset the construction excise tax that would go to the school district, potentially in exchange for some land that then would belong to the district, so the district could own without expense property which could potentially offset the cost of a future development of a building.
I guess that was one of my concerns too. In the long run, if we need to build, where is it gonna be?
Yeah. And personally, I would prefer for a new elementary school or just school building, I would prefer for a new school building to exist inside a new neighborhood.
I was going to say the same thing. You know, a lot of new communities build around it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth looking at South Hillsborough. I think there's something like 14,000 lots they're bringing online, or have already brought on a portion of them in the last couple of years. And they're putting, Safeways and mini malls and this thing, and they're building a new city is what it amounts to. But at the same time, they're also building schools within that. And obviously, Hillsborough School District or Beaverton or whoever abuts that. I mean, it could be Forest Grove, Cornelius, all that. There's got to be some communication. There's got to be some level of working together, because there's a certain whimsy about, oh yeah, I'm going to move into the subdivision and my kids are going to be able to walk to school across the street or walk down the street, and brand new playground and everything that goes along with it. So the one thing I would, before we get the cart too far ahead of the horse, is we've built this campus.
Yes.
And we're using this campus idea to our advantage, or to build the narrative of we can't reutilize Eagle Creek because of the distance. But then let's not go out of our way to go halfway to Eagle Creek and put a school, because then everybody's going to look at you and go, "What do you?" I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It might work in Portland or something like that, but it's not going to work out here.
Yeah.
So,
well said.
And if that means we put it on the back edge of the north complex that we currently have, great. Or there's a lot of gray area there, but I would hate to push it all the way out to Deuce Road and then say, hey, guys,
Yeah. Yep.
here you go.
Yeah, I think you're saying that correctly. Although within
Well,
the...
Right.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's also an opportunity to parlay that in those new subdivisions with parks, right, fields, athletic fields, or fields for multi-purpose use, right? So it would behoove some builders to participate in those conversations, and I think it would be very smart for us to start leading some of those conversations to see what the opportunities are, because there's ample growth and there's ample opportunity if we can find the right people who are motivated to be part of the solution, and not just slamming houses and moving on. We can make a true difference for what the Escada community looks like.
Yes. Yes.
There's one other opportunity of growth closer in, and that's the RSG mill site. I don't think they're currently wanting to block out 3 acres or 5 acres for a school, but there's a lot of buzz around the mill site in that it's the closest in big chunk of ground for the city, and a great development potential. So, and it's a little bit closer to the core of the city, the public library, skate park, and all those other assets. So,
Yeah.
another thought there.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on something that Director Rydell mentioned, Vice Chair Rydell said, with athletic fields. I think we can all appreciate that we're outside playing sports right now. And I know, particularly with baseball, there's 280-something kids. Is that right, Will?
Yep.
280 kids that have left the beehive of their home for the last 14 months and are out enjoying fresh air and organized activities, and we're lacking in the organized sports fields. So if we have some Esser funds left over, it might be a good idea to utilize that for improvements on the North Athletic Complex, whether it's driveway, roads, backstops, soccer goals, field goals, cross-country track, whatever that is, because I think that's going to be the next area of growth that we're already seeing.
Yeah. We are already over capacity with the new fields that we've added. I agree with that.
Anybody else want to add anything on that? We have soccer people in the house.
But, thanks, Ben. It also reminds me that we have a bunch of dirt too. So,
Yeah.
if we're looking at everything.
Yes.
But, yeah, good point.
Do we have any other things that need to be brought up while we're on this topic? If you forget, we're going to meet again in about a week, and we can definitely talk about it more then as a discussion item. Maybe a little more consolidated than 2 hours, but if something comes up, let's do that.
Well, I very much appreciate the time that you were able to put tonight just for us to be able to have this dialogue and conversation. Again, I think we as a team have done an excellent job of developing our leadership capacities during this time, during this pandemic, and I see this as another opportunity for the Estacada School District to play a leadership role in our community of how we can best facilitate and foster this growth. So I know you're all busy. I know that you're all doing so many other things to benefit the Estacada community, up to and including coaching youth athletics and being a part of just some of the great things that are going on in Estacada. So the 2 hours that you spent tonight was helpful for me as we try to align our mission, vision, and values to execute. And I'm excited to come back to you next Thursday at the regularly scheduled Board of Directors meeting to begin to get the ball rolling as the Estacada School District prepares for growth.
Excellent. With that, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:54. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Do we have any guests online?
There were about 6 people watching our YouTube channel live, in and out, which is 6 more people than usual, which is fantastic. And there's 1 on Zoom.
Okay, excellent. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Everybody.